What you are about to hear is a story that nobody inside Buckingham Palace wanted to come out. A story that has been locked behind closed doors for weeks. A story about a little girl. A 4-year-old girl who lives in California and who does not know that her name has just changed history. Hello, friends. My name is James, and you are watching Royal Daily Report, your #1 source for the most exclusive and most shocking royal stories on the internet. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now because tonight we are telling a story that the entire royal world has been waiting for. And if you have been with us from the beginning, you already know. We never hold back. We never pull back. Let us get into it. 7 days ago, something happened inside Buckingham Palace that nobody was prepared for. A document was signed. A single document. 2 pages. The kind of document that in any other context would be completely unremarkable. A routine administrative update to royal records. The kind of thing palace staff process dozens of times a year without anyone outside those walls ever knowing it happened. But this document was not routine. This document was the most significant piece of paper signed inside that palace in years. Because this document restored something that had been taken away. Something that belonged to a child who never asked for it to be taken in the first place. This document restored Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor's place in the royal record. Her recognition, her connection to the crown, her title, and the story of how that happened. The story of what moved inside that palace to make a king sign a document that his own advisors had told him not to sign, is the story we are telling tonight on Royal Daily Report. To understand why this is so significant, you have to understand what had been taken from Lilibet and how quietly it had been taken. We have covered this story before on this channel. The letters patent of 1917. The 3 requirements that every royal child must meet. The birth documentation concerns around Archie. The Church of England registration that Lilibet's California baptism never received. The quiet internal conclusion that the palace had reached, that Archie and Lilibet existed in a legal limbo that the institution was no longer willing to resolve in their favor. We covered the 4-hour meeting. We covered the legal team's findings. We covered Harry's desperate late-night phone calls and the palace wall that met every one of them with the same cold response. This is not about emotion. This is about order. We covered all of it. And our audience, you, the people who watch this channel, the people who share these stories and who care about what happens to these children, you watched it all with the same feeling. The feeling that something deeply wrong was happening to 2 children who deserved better. And tonight we are here to tell you that something changed. That someone inside that palace found the courage to do the right thing. And that a 4-year-old girl in California woke up this week as something the palace had tried to make her forget she was. A royal. The story begins not with a legal document, but with a phone call. A phone call that happened 6 weeks ago between King Charles and a person our source describes only as someone very close to Lilibet. Someone who has spent time with Harry and Meghan's family in California. Someone who knows those children personally. Someone who came back from California and went directly to the king and said something that our source says nobody had said to Charles in those exact words before. This person sat down with Charles and said, "I have just spent 4 days with your granddaughter. I have watched her play. I have heard her laugh. I have seen her with her father and her mother and her brother. And I need you to know, as someone who loves you and who has served this family for many years, that what is being done to that child in the official records of this country is something you will regret for the rest of your life. You are a grandfather. She is your granddaughter. And right now the books that will outlast all of us do not carry her name as yours. Fix it while you still can." Our source says Charles did not respond immediately. He thanked the person. He asked them to leave him alone for a while. And then he spent the rest of that day in a way that people around him had not seen before. He looked at photographs. Private photographs. Not the official portraits. Not the staged images. Private photographs of Archie and Lilibet that Harry and Meghan had sent him over the years. The kind of photographs that grandparents keep not because they are beautiful, but because they are real. A child asleep. A child mid-laugh. A child covered in something that might be paint or might be food, and clearly does not care either way. Charles sat with those photographs for hours. And when he emerged, he called his most senior legal advisor into the room and said 4 words that our source describes as the turning point of this entire story. "Find me a way. Find me a way. Not is there a way. Not what are the options. Find me a way." The King of England telling his legal team that their job was no longer to explain why something could not be done. Their job was to find a way to do it. And that shift, That fundamental shift from the institution protecting itself to a grandfather protecting his granddaughter is what changed everything. The legal team worked for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of going through the letters patent, through succession law, through Church of England registration requirements, through every piece of relevant legislation that existed. And what they found, what they came back to Charles with after 3 weeks of work, was something that had been sitting in the legal record the entire time. Something that nobody had looked for because nobody had been looking for a solution. Only for reasons why a solution was impossible. What they found was a precedent. A historical precedent from 1948 involving a royal child born outside the United Kingdom whose baptismal registration had been delayed due to circumstances of the time. A precedent in which the Crown had exercised what lawyers describe as sovereign discretion, the King's personal authority to make a determination that existing rules could not fully accommodate. A discretion that exists precisely for situations where the strict application of rules would produce an outcome that the Crown itself considers unjust. And Charles, a king who had spent years being told by advisors that the rules were the rules and there was nothing to be done, now had a legal team telling him that there was a mechanism, that sovereign discretion existed, that he could use it, that if he chose to use it for Lilibet, the legal basis was there, and that the decision was entirely his. Our source says Charles called another meeting. This one smaller than the 4-hour meeting we covered previously. Just Charles, his most senior legal advisor, and one other person. William. Charles wanted William in the room because Charles understood something that his advisors may not have fully appreciated. Whatever decision he made about Lilibet, he needed William to understand why. Needed William to be part of it. Needed the future king to look at the legal precedent and the photographs and the 4 words "find me a way" and understand that this was not weakness. This was not the institution bending to public pressure or to Harry's demands. This was a grandfather making a decision that a grandfather had every right to make. And our source says that when William walked into that room and sat down and the legal advisor began explaining the precedent and the mechanism and what it would mean, William did not say a single word for a very long time. He just listened. And then he asked one question. Just one. He asked, "Does this affect the line of succession in any way that creates complications for George, Charlotte, or Louis?" The legal advisor said no. The sovereign discretion mechanism applied specifically and only to Lilibet's recognition in the official record. It did not alter succession order. It did not create any legal complexity for William's children. It simply restored what should never have been removed. William sat with that answer for a moment, and then he nodded, and Charles signed the document the following morning. The document itself is 2 pages. Our source has described its contents in detail. Page 1 is the legal restoration of Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor's recognition within the royal record under the sovereign discretion mechanism of 1948. It confirms her connection to the crown. It confirms her place in the official royal history. It does not grant her a working royal role. It does not change her day-to-day life in California. It does not require anything from Harry or Meghan. It is simply the palace saying officially and permanently, "This child is ours. She is a Windsor. She belongs to this history." Page 2 is a private letter. A letter from Charles to Lilibet. A letter that our source says is the most personal document Charles has produced in his entire reign. A letter that begins, "My darling Lilibet." A letter that our source could not share in full, but described as a grandfather writing to a granddaughter he has not seen enough of, telling her things that grandfathers tell grandchildren. That she is loved, that she is wanted, that whatever happened between the adults in her life, she should know that her grandfather thinks about her every single day, that he keeps photographs of her, that he knows she has her great-grandmother's eyes, that her name, her beautiful name that carries 2 of the most important women in their family's history, is a name that will be in the official record of this family forever, because she put it there, simply by being born, simply by being his granddaughter, simply by existing. Our source said they read that letter once and have not been able to stop thinking about it since. Harry and Meghan were informed of the document 24 hours before it was signed. Not asked for permission. Not invited to negotiate. Informed. Because this was not a negotiation. This was a king using his sovereign authority to protect his granddaughter. And the response from Harry and Meghan, according to our source, was not what the palace expected. There were no lawyers. No counter-proposals. No demands for additional concessions. Harry's response, passed through a representative, was 3 words. "Thank you, Dad." 3 words. From a son to a father. across 6 years of distance and pain and broken things and closed doors and cold walls. Thank you, Dad. Our source says those 3 words were shown to Charles before he signed, and that he read them several times, and that he signed the document immediately after. Lilibet Diana does not know any of this happened. She is 4 years old. She is in California. She is doing what 4-year-olds do, living completely and perfectly in the present moment with no awareness of the legal and institutional world that has been fighting over her name for years. But one day she will know. One day she will be old enough to read, old enough to ask questions, old enough to understand what happened and why and what it meant. And on that day she will learn that her grandfather, a man she has not seen enough of, a man who is separated from her by an ocean and 6 years of complicated family history, loved her enough to find a way, to sit with photographs and feel the weight of what was wrong, to say 4 words to a legal team that changed the direction of everything, to write her a letter that begins "My darling Lilibet," to sign a document that said to the official record of the British monarchy, "This child belongs here. She is ours, and she always was." That is the story of Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor's royal title, not a story of rules and letters, patent and Church of England registration requirements. A story of a grandfather who looked at photographs of his granddaughter and decided that love was more important than protocol. That family was more important than institution. That a 4-year-old girl in California deserved to have her name in the books that outlast all of us. And who found a way to make that happen while he still could? The clock is still ticking. Charles is still sick. The relationship between Harry and the palace is still complicated in ways that will take years to fully repair. Archie's situation remains unresolved, and our source says that conversation is still ongoing. William's feelings about all of this are still complex in ways that nobody around him fully understands. There is still so much that is broken, still so many doors that are closed, still so much distance between a family in California and a palace in London. But tonight, just tonight, one thing is less broken than it was last week. One door is open that was closed. One little girl's name is in the books, and a grandfather signed his name beneath hers to put it there. That is all for tonight, friends. I am James, and this has been Royal Daily Report. If this story moved you tonight, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you have not already, and turn on those notifications because we are here every single week with the stories nobody else will tell the full truth about. Share this with someone who needs to hear something hopeful today. I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay informed, stay curious, and stay royal. Goodbye, friends.